If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and follow our channel for more stories like this. Before Manhattan reached for the sky, it stood on the shoulders of men who dared to climb into places where no human was ever meant to stand. Long before the city became a kingdom of steel and shadow, it was little more than a restless dream waiting for hands brave enough to shape it. Those hands belonged to men who balanced on narrow beams, hundreds of feet above the streets with nothing but wind and instinct keeping them alive. But their legacy is not only written in blueprints or rivets. Across the decades, the workers who built these monumental towers whispered about presences that followed them on the steel. Strange sensations, fleeting silhouettes, echoes of footsteps where no one should be. Some said it was fear, others said it was imagination, and a few insisted it was something far older, something that rises with every floor and never truly goes away. At the dawn of the 20th century, Manhattan was a battlefield, not of armies but of architects, engineers, and financiers determined to build their names into the skyline. The city's footprint was limited, but its ambitions were not. And so began the race upward, a vertical contest that would redefine the American identity. Between 1900 and 1931, skyscrapers didn't just appear, they erupted. Structures like the Flatiron, the Woolworth Building, and later, the Chrysler and Empire State rose with unprecedented speed. Behind the glamour, however, lay an unforgiving reality. The workdays were long, the equipment primitive by today's standards, and every climb higher meant stepping further outside the boundaries of human survival. But for some reason, despite the danger, thousands enlisted, each man drawn by a mix of pride, desperation, and the thrill of shaping a new world. And in their stories, buried in newspapers, interviews, and folklore, the first hints of the unexplained began to surface. They were called many things: sky boys, roughnecks, high steel walkers, and to some, ghosts in the making. The crews who built Manhattan's first towers came from every corner of the country and beyond. Mohawk iron workers from Kanawake, whose balance and fearlessness became the stuff of legend. Irish and Italian immigrants chasing the promise of a new life. Veterans of bridge projects along the Hudson. Each man carried his own history, but once he stepped onto the beams, they were all the same. Silhouettes against the sky. Photographs from the era show them sitting casually on exposed girders, eating lunch with their legs dangling over nothingness. But those images hide the truth. Every day they faced deafening noise, violent winds, and the constant knowledge that one misstep meant the end. And beneath the surface of their daily bravery ran another thread, the stories they rarely told outsiders. Stories of strange sensations on the steel, of voices carried by the wind that didn't match anyone on the crew, of tools that vanished or reappeared. They worked with steel but lived with shadows. The early skyscraper boom was built on innovation and tragedy. Accidents were so frequent that newspapers often published weekly tallies of injuries and deaths. The New York Times documented at least 5 fatal accidents during the Empire State Building's rapid construction in 1929 and 1930, though workers insisted the true number was higher. On earlier sites like the Woolworth Building, stories circulated about riveters lost to sudden gusts or falling beams. Safety harnesses were non-existent, and medical crews struggled to reach injured men on upper floors. Yet what unsettled many workers wasn't just the accidents themselves, but the circumstances surrounding some of them. Falls that made no sense, tools that slipped as if pulled, sudden shifts of balance on stable beams. Officially, everything was attributed to risk, exhaustion, or human error. Unofficially, men whispered that certain floors felt wrong, that certain corners of unfinished buildings carried a weight, as if the structure itself was aware of them. In interviews conducted decades later with retired steelworkers, especially those who had survived the 1920s building boom, patterns began to emerge. These were not storytellers or men prone to fantasy. They were practical, hardened laborers. Yet even they described moments they couldn't explain. Cold patches on sunlit beams, footsteps approaching from behind, only for the walkway to be empty. The sound of hammering on floors no crew had worked on that day. Men claimed to feel watched, as if someone else were sharing the steel with them. Someone they could sense but not see. One worker described it as the building learning who you are. Another said, "You're never alone up there, even if you think you are." These weren't ghost stories, not exactly. They were fragments of memory, scattered across decades of dangerous labor, repeated just enough times to give them weight.
Look out! It slipped! Watch yourselves below!
Among the most persistent legends from Manhattan's early construction era is the story of a riveter who vanished mid-shift, an account passed from crew to crew for decades. Some place the event during the early work on the Equitable building. Others insist it happened on the Metropolitan Life Tower. No official incident report survives, but the details are unsettlingly consistent. Workers claim the man walked out across a temporary beam, carrying his tools as he did every day. He was seen stepping onto the middle of the girder, and then he was simply gone. No fall, no scream, no trace. Hours later, his tools were found neatly arranged on a section of flooring no crew had accessed that morning. Some said it was misremembered, others called it superstition. But those who swore the story was real believed something took him, something that walked the steel long before any human did.
Look, over there! What is that? It just vanished into the fog.
Engineers have long insisted that every odd sound or strange sensation has a logical explanation. Thermal expansion, metal resonance, wind harmonics, fatigue, tools misplaced by mistake. These explanations make sense, and often they are correct. But workers from multiple sites across multiple decades described patterns that logic struggles to contain. Shadows that moved independently of the sun's position. Voices calling names in languages no one on the crew spoke. The sensation of a hand steadying your shoulder before realizing no one was near you. One foreman recalled a moment during the construction of the Chrysler building when he saw what he believed was a worker standing on an unfinished beam, only for the figure to dissolve into the morning fog as he approached. Engineers dismissed all of it. Workers didn't argue, they simply learned not to question what the steel remembered. Night watchmen and security guards assigned to skyscraper sites often reported events that never made it into official records. During the construction of the Empire State Building, several guards claimed to hear the rapid clanging of metal being hammered, long after crews had gone home. One guard said he followed the sound of footsteps across the 5th floor, only to discover footprints in dust where no worker had been that week. Another reported hearing a rivet roll across the concrete. When he found it, the metal was still warm, as if freshly heated. These men had no reason to invent stories. Many didn't believe in ghosts at all. but nearly all agreed on one thing. The buildings were not empty at night. Not truly. In 1926, during work on a midtown commercial tower, an accident occurred that remained a point of debate among workers for years. A young man, experienced, steady, respected by his crew, suddenly lost his balance and fell from a beam. There was no wind, no loose equipment, no structural shift. Several men who witnessed it claimed they saw him react to something behind him, as if brushed by an unseen presence. Investigators blamed fatigue. The coroner called it an accident. But one worker insisted he didn't slip, he reacted, like someone touched him. Accidents happened all the time, but this one felt different. And in the minds of those who saw it, something else had been on that beam. Historians argue that these stories are exaggerations, the natural result of dangerous work, physical exhaustion, and the human tendency to make sense of fear. Yet when interviews from the 1950s and 1960s are compared, the consistency is startling. Workers who never met, from different decades and different sites, all described similar sensations. It led to the term whispered among old crews, phantom builders, not spirits haunting the living, but the impressions left behind by men who died on the job. One retired ironworker said it best: "When a man dies on the steel keeps his story, and sometimes you feel it telling you something. Not proof, not mythology, but something lingering between the two."
Grab my hands! Hold on!
Today, the skyscrapers of Manhattan stand as symbols of human achievement, testaments to ambition, engineering brilliance, and the relentless drive to build higher. But beneath their polished facades lie stories that were never written in books. Stories carried in the memories of the men who climbed their frames. Many workers who lived long enough to see the towers completed said they felt a strange sense of familiarity whenever they passed by, as if the buildings themselves recognized them, as if the steel remembered the hands that shaped it and the lives it took along the way. To outsiders, these tales might sound like superstition. To those who built the skyline, they are simply truth. The Manhattan skyline is more than architecture. It is a vast archive of human stories, some triumphs, some tragedies, some unexplained. Those who worked the high steel believed that every floor carried memories, and every beam held echoes of men who never returned to the ground. Perhaps these are only legends, or perhaps the city's greatest towers stand as monuments not only to progress, but to the builders whose presence never truly faded. In the end, whether real or imagined, the stories remain, and the skyline's shadows grow a little deeper every year. This is the tale of the phantom builders, where progress meets the unexplained. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and follow our channel for more stories like this.